how did you guys get into the
Well,
storage?
Anderson, actually, for 15 or 20 years, I was a top-ranked international male escort.
Storage Wars family is breaking up, and no one is talking about it like they should. One cast member died from a private battle no one anticipated. Another member was lost due to silent damage over decades. Now the latest loss has a community asking questions, but what actually happens behind the scenes of one of reality TV's most beloved series? And how many farewells can this family take? Join us as we take a closer look at the Storage Wars cast members who have passed away. Darrell Sheets, the gambler who kept too much to himself. Some people bear their struggles quietly, and some wear them openly. Darrell Sheets certainly fit in the first category. During his 13 seasons on Storage Wars, he built a reputation as the Gambler, a nickname that said something essential about his style on the auction floor. He made big bids on iffy lockers. He took chances where other buyers wouldn't. Sometimes he lost, and sometimes he won spectacularly. And the tension between those two outcomes was just what made him a compelling watch. He had been on the show since its first episode in December 2010, and over 163 episodes in 13 years, he had become one of the most recognizable faces the show has ever produced. His son Brandon joined him for many seasons, adding a family element to his story that played differently to viewers than the straight-up auction story. Beyond storage lockers, the show had texture as it watched a father and son navigate the same professional world, with all the tension and affection that dynamic brings. Off-camera, Darrell was running his own operation in the resale world, building and maintaining the kind of business that his television presence amplified but did not create. He knew what he was doing before the show came to him, and that expertise gave an authenticity to his participation that carried over more than a decade of filming. Then March 2019 came, and everything changed. That year, Darrell had a heart attack, a serious medical event that required surgery and stents put in his arteries. He survived, but the recovery was extensive, and the experience of facing a health crisis that could be life-threatening in your early 60s has a way of reshaping how a person sees the time they have left. He had reportedly suffered back-to-back cardiac events during that time, adding to the physical and emotional weight of his experience. After his health problems, he retired to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, leaving behind the pace of life that filming a television show requires. He opened an antique shop called Havasu Show Me Your Junk in Arizona, a business that kept him in touch with the world of resale that had defined his professional life for decades. It was a quieter chapter, a slower pace, a life that looked, from the outside, like a man who had earned his rest and was taking it. He was on Storage Wars until 2023, his last season on the show that made him famous. And then he stepped back entirely, settling into the Arizona life he had built for himself after the health scares had made the priorities clear. Only those closest to him fully know what was happening in the months and weeks before his death. What the public record shows is that Darrell was allegedly the target of sustained online harassment during that period. The day of Darrell's passing, his co-star Darrell Nezhoda posted an emotional video on Instagram detailing one particular person who had allegedly been hounding him non-stop. Nezhoda's words were straightforward and raw. He said Darrell had been posting about the harassment, that it had been really tormenting him, and that he hoped authorities would look into the person responsible and not just let it pass. Renee's message was about something bigger than the details of Darrell's case. Just because you see someone on television doesn't mean you know them, he told his audience. It does not mean you know what they are dealing with behind closed doors. And it certainly does not give anyone the right to persecute them without let-up. "You never know what demons somebody's fighting and what you might push them through," he said. Those words carried a different weight depending on the context in which they'd been spoken. In the early hours of April 22, 2026, officers with the Lake Havasu City Police Department were dispatched to a residence on Chandler Drive in Lake Havasu City after a report of a deceased individual. They arrived to find Darrell Sheets. He was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 67. The Mojave County Medical Examiner's Office officially confirmed the cause of death as self-harm on May 5, 2026. The toxicology report came back all clear, and it was released in late May. His system showed no substances at all. Lake Havasu City Police also confirmed they were investigating allegations of cyberbullying in connection with Darrell's death. His mobile phone was taken for forensic examination. The results were being awaited by the Criminal Investigations Unit. Anyone with information is asked to contact the department directly. The investigation was still ongoing. Darrell's longtime friend and co-star Brandy Passante, who had filmed with him for years across several seasons, posted a tribute saying she was at a complete loss for words. "I've known him for many years, and my heart goes out to his son Brandon, his daughter Tiffany, and his other family members who are left behind," she said. She also took the opportunity to use her platform to encourage anyone struggling to reach out for help, echoing the message that Darrell Nezhoda had already put into the world that day. The response from the broader Storage Wars community reflected the specific kind of grief that arrives when someone who seemed solid and steady is suddenly, irreversibly gone. Darrell was not someone who had appeared fragile on screen. He was the gambler. He was the man who walked into an uncertain situation, assessed the risk with a grin, and placed his bet anyway. That image, built across 13 seasons of television, made the reality of what happened in Lake Havasu City feel particularly impossible to reconcile. Because that is the thing about the version of a person that television creates. It is real in its way. The bids Darrell made were real. The wins and the losses were real. The relationship with his son that played out across those seasons was real. But it is also incomplete in the way that any version of a person captured in a specific context is incomplete. The camera catches what it catches. It does not follow you home. It does not sit with you in the quiet hours. It does not see what accumulates in the spaces between the episodes. For 13 years, Darrell Sheets let an audience into a carefully limited part of his life. What was going on outside that border, in the secret spaces where the pressures mounted and the battles were fought, was his alone. But as heartbreaking as Darrell's death was, the Storage Wars family had experienced loss before. And if you want to grasp the full weight of what this community has endured, you have to go back to where it all began, to the man in the shiny suit, whose private pain arrived long before anyone was paying attention. Mark Balelo, the life behind the shiny suits. If you watched Storage Wars in its first few seasons, you knew Mark Balelo the second he walked on screen. He was impossible not to notice. The shiny suits, the strut, the personality to fill any room he entered, and then some. He debuted in 2011, and from his first appearance, he brought an energy to the show that was all his own. They called him Rico Suave, a name that captured something real about who he was on camera. He was flashy, charming, and entertaining in that way that makes reality television worth watching. But behind the persona created by the show was a man whose life was far more complicated than the auction floor would have you believe. Mark had built a legit career in the resale world before Storage Wars. He ran a business called Balelo Enterprises, a consignment and estate sale business that provided him the knowledge base that the show later documented. He wasn't putting on a show for the cameras. He knew his business, and that knowledge showed up in every bid he put in and every locker he walked away from. He also had a creative side that most viewers never knew existed. Friends who knew him said he was involved in independent films, played bass guitar, and even worked with George Lynch of the rock band Dokken and musician Pat Travers. He was more than the shiny suits suggested. There always is, with people who make a living entertaining in public. Mark Balelo was arrested on February 9, 2013, on suspicion of possession of methamphetamine. The arrest details were briefly reported and then largely swallowed by the news cycle with little further scrutiny. He was a reality TV personality who had a drug charge, and that was news. And then they moved on, as celebrity news does. What nobody understood at the time was the effect that the arrest had on him personally. The public exposure of the charge, plus whatever he was carrying privately, created a pressure the people around him did not fully see until it was too late. Mark Balelo died 3 days after that arrest. He was 40 years old. The Storage Wars community was shocked. His co-stars, the production team, and the audience who had endured 2 seasons of his brand of energy on the show were left processing a loss nobody saw coming. The Mark the cameras had captured, the confident, flashy, endlessly entertaining Rico Suave, showed no sign of what was going on beneath the surface. It was the first loss ever for the Storage Wars family. And it would be 10 years before the next one. This time not from a sudden crisis, but from something that had been building silently for 30 years. Gunter Nezhoda, the quiet one who meant the most. Gunter Nezhoda wasn't the loudest personality on Storage Wars. He lacked the showmanship of Mark Balelo and the high-rolling instincts of Darrell Sheets. What he had was something the show's most vociferous personalities sometimes struggled to manufacture. He was genuinely, universally liked. His son and fellow Storage Wars personality, Darrell Nezhoda, said it clearly in the video he posted confirming his father's passing. Gunter was one of the cast members who never really attracted hate. People just loved being around him, including the crew. Everybody loved working with him. In a show built partly on conflict and competition, that kind of unanimous warmth is rare. It says something real about who a person is when the cameras are not rolling. Gunter was born in Austria and spent decades building a life in the resale world before Storage Wars came calling. He and his family ran a thrift store operation that formed the basis for his participation in the show. He brought a quiet competence and a warmth to the screen that balanced the more explosive personalities around him. He was the kind of cast member you miss more than you think you will, because he was never trying to take over the screen. It was just there, really, there. He was also a smoker for about 3 decades prior to his diagnosis. Not a small detail to share, as Renee did in the Instagram video confirming his passing. 30 years is a long time to accumulate that kind of damage silently, building in the background of a busy life, without announcing itself until the point it is impossible to ignore. Gunter was diagnosed with lung cancer in September 2022. The diagnosis came 6 months before he died, so he spent those 6 months knowing what was coming and still being the person his family and the people who loved him needed him to be. That's no small matter. To have a terminal diagnosis, yet still have the warmth and presence all who knew him describe, takes a kind of quiet strength that's not celebrated the same way louder forms of courage are. Gunter Nezhoda passed away peacefully in his sleep on March 22, 2023, from complications of lung cancer. He was 67. Renee confirmed his passing in an emotional Instagram video detailing the damage the cancer had done to his lungs and the point at which the doctors had run out of options. The tributes that followed from the Storage Wars community were exactly what Renee had described. The cast and crew who had worked with him for years spoke of a man who had never made an enemy on set, who had shown up every time with real enthusiasm and had made the show better just by being part of it. Gunter Nezhoda left a legacy that had nothing to do with the lockers he was bidding on. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with the way he treated the people around him. And that quiet consistency is its own kind of remarkable thing, especially in a world that often rewards the loudest voice in the room. But before the losses began, the show had already come closer to tragedy than anyone watching at home knew. The year's Storage Wars almost lost 2 casts. As the audience was watching the auctions, the rivalries, and everything the cameras were supposed to capture, 2 of the show's most familiar faces were quietly fighting for their lives off-screen. And hardly anyone knew how very bad it had almost been. Dave Hester had the first close call, and it came in the dead of night without any warning. In November 2018, Dave woke up in the middle of the night feeling ill and unable to breathe. His girlfriend rushed him to a hospital in Newport Beach, California, where doctors delivered a diagnosis that stopped everything. He had had a hemorrhagic stroke. Further testing determined that he had been living with severe sleep apnea, a condition so advanced that his breathing was stopping more than 100 times every hour while he was sleeping. That amount of oxygen deprivation, combined with high blood pressure, had triggered the stroke. He told TMZ afterward that he had no idea how serious his condition had become until that night. Before the sleep apnea ever had the chance to, the stroke made itself known. He lay in the ICU for days. From there, he was moved to a live-in rehabilitation facility for a month of intensive recovery. But by September 2019, almost a year after the stroke, he still hadn't fully recovered. Something happening in his own body when he was unconscious had brought the man who had built his entire Storage Wars persona around dominance, aggression, and the relentless pursuit of winning to a complete stop. He missed out on seasons 13, 14, and 15 entirely. And that was 3 whole seasons away from the show that he helped build from the very beginning. When he finally came back for season 16, in 2025, his co-stars were met with a mix of shock and frustration that seemed entirely real. Because no one really thought we'd see him back. The stroke seemed, for a long time, like it might be permanent. Then, 4 months after Dave's stroke, the show almost lost another one. On April 24, 2019, Barry Weiss was riding his motorcycle with a friend through the Los Feliz area of Los Angeles when a car pulled out of a parking space directly in front of them. There was no time to halt. Barry and his companion crashed into the rear of the car. Later that same day, his friend posted from the hospital that he himself had a broken knee, elbow, and wrist, before adding that Barry's condition was much worse. Barry was badly hurt in the chest and leg. The post concluded with a plea for prayers. Barry was taken to a Los Angeles hospital and placed in intensive care. He was broken and internally wounded. He underwent several operations, including ones on his back and femur. He was in the hospital for 2 months, convalescing. At that time, there were also unconfirmed reports that he had suffered a stroke while recovering, but this was never officially confirmed. What was confirmed was that the injuries were serious enough to keep him off television altogether for more than 2 years, and out of the auction world that had defined his public identity since 2010. He returned in 2021 in season 14, pulling up in a 1939 Lincoln Zephyr, rolling down the window, and asking the audience if they missed him. The entrance was just the sort of thing his Storage Wars fans had always loved him for. But behind the showmanship was a man who had spent 2 years in hospitals, rehabilitation, and recovery, doing the quiet, unglamorous work of rebuilding a body that had been seriously damaged in an instant on a California street. He made a short cameo in season 15 in 2023 before leaving the show for good. By season 16, he was gone again, with no explanation from him or the network about why. The show that nearly lost both of them in the same year continued. New seasons were filmed, but the cast that had started it all back in 2010 was slowly becoming a different group of people than the one the audience had originally fallen in love with. Some came back, some stepped away, and some, as the years that followed would show, never got the chance to return at all. Of all these losses, whose absence do you feel most when you watch the show today? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.